Hello, and welcome to another Reigate Maths video. In this video, we're covering the final topic of the first year of the Critical Path Analysis chapter from the Decision 1 unit in the A-Level Further Maths specification for Edexcel. My name's Simon, and this final video focuses on Gantt charts. Although this isn't the final topic full stop for Critical Path Analysis, this is where the first year finishes. The second year goes into extending to look at an additional resource in number of workers for activities. Gantt charts are really important in project management because they allow the project manager to graphically see what activities need to be done by when and what can be doing at various times. Gantt charts, or otherwise known as Cascade Diagrams, are usually the final part of one of these questions, because you need the activity network to be completed in order to complete a Gantt chart. So let's start off by reviewing the activity network process, and then we can use that to draw a Gantt chart. So here's the activity network we're going to use for our example for drawing a Gantt chart. Like the previous video, what I'd like you to do is pause, complete the activity network with a forward pass and a backwards pass to find the duration of the project. Then restart the video and we'll look at how we draw a Gantt chart from this activity network. So this is what you should have got. Now the other thing we need to do is identify the critical path, which for this network is not too difficult. We can see here that it's going to be A, C, E, F, H. Notice, like we saw in the previous video when we were looking at critical activities, G is a good example of one that starts and finishes at critical events, but is not itself critical. Getting the critical path is quite important for a Gantt chart because this is the first thing we're going to put on it. So in order to draw the Gantt chart, we're going to need a grid like this. The good thing with this is very typically in the exam, they will give you a grid or something similar. Now, they'll label it at the top like this. So this block here is day 1. So the numbers are, when you get to that number, you have completed that many days. So this is the day 1, day 2, day 3, and so on. The other thing they will do is, very typically, they will give you, or they will label more columns than the actual completion time of the project. This is so that you don't get a hint if you are doing the forward and backwards passes earlier in the question of what the right answer is. So we need to fill this in, and the first thing we do is we put in the critical path. So A, we can see starts at 0, finishes at 0. So we draw it 4 long, and you label it with an A. The critical path we draw next to each other. So we can see C, which is our next critical activity, has a duration of 5. So it goes from 4 to 9. And we label it C. In the exam, quite often they will give you slightly lighter or thinner lines, so it's very clear the ending there. These ones just happen to be quite thick, which is why I'm putting a sort of bold line there. So we continue with the critical path. We can see E has a duration of 3. Whoops. E has a duration of 3. F has a duration of 2. And H has a duration of 2. And this is our critical path done. Now, generally, with Gantt charts or cascade diagrams, all of the non-critical activities we're going to do in alphabetical order going down, and you want to draw them starting as early as they possibly can. This might vary depending on the wording of the question. They may say drawing the activities starting as late as possible, but we'll look at how you can adapt this once we're done. So we'll do them in alphabetical order now. So next one is B. So B starts at 4 and it has a duration of 3. You would obviously also use a ruler for these in your exam. Now B, we can see, starts at 4. The earliest B can finish is 7, but the latest B can finish is 12. So we need to indicate that float on our diagram. And you do that with a dotted line like this. The other thing the mark schemes tend to do is shade it in as well. As long as it's clear what you mean, that's fine. So this is now B. This is why Gantt charts, cascade diagrams are good, because they can show you very clearly where B can start and finish. So we can put this block of length 3 anywhere in this hashed out box, provided it finishes by 12 and it won't affect the completion time of the project. So visually, it's very easy to see what's going on. So we're going to continue down the page. If you leave a little gap, that's fine. If you don't, that's also fine. The mark schemes generally do leave a gap there. So we've got B, C is done, D's next. So D can start at 7. And can go up to 14. We've done E and F. So we've just got G to do now. So G can start at 9. Has a duration of 3. And can go up to 16. And we've got H there. And this is a Gantt chart. Now, you can see hopefully why it's called a cascade diagram. It sort of cascades down the page. Sometimes it won't always have this nice sort of that flow. Sometimes you might have B, then D, but then another activity starts here. That's fine. You don't necessarily have this permanent nice gradient here. Overall, that is the direction that these activities will go in, but they might be sort of offset a little bit, and that's fine. So that's how you draw a Gantt chart. As long as your labels are clear, you've used a ruler, and you've shaded things in, that's all good. Now, if you have multiple critical paths, like we have seen in previous examples, you don't need to draw the boxes for the activities you've already drawn in the first critical path in the second. You just draw the additional activities. So if A and H are in 2 critical paths, you don't draw A and H twice, you don't draw A and H double the size, you just draw them like we've done here, and then put any additional critical activities underneath. You still do them first though, and then do the rest of the non-critical activities. The shaded in areas on the non-critical activities, you can see the length of those is the float of those activities as well. So that is something that, again, once you've calculated them, makes drawing these diagrams very straightforward. So what can we do with cascade diagrams? Well, the first thing we can do, and one of the main things that they're going to ask you to do, is to say what activities must be happening on particular days and which ones might be happening on particular days. So if we think about must be happening at midday on day 11, for instance, we can see that day 1 is the one that goes from 0 to 1, so day 11 is the one that goes from 10 to 11. So we're looking at midday here. So if we look down along this line here, we can see that there's one activity that must be happening, which is activity E. B, D, and G might be happening there, but aren't necessarily going to be happening at midday on day 11, because the float extends past. Now, if G, for instance, had a float of 1, so G finished here, G also must be happening at midday on day 11, because either day 11 goes in the middle of G, or G would have to go here. So in either of those cases, G would have to be happening at midday on day 11. So you do have to look at the floats of these activities as well. We might then get a question where it's what activities might be happening at midday on day 11. And we can see that B might be, because the float goes through midday on day 11, as might D and G. Notice how E is not a correct answer to might be happening on day 11. E must be, these might be. That's kind of the main thing that they ask you to do with Gantt charts or cascade diagrams. You might be given a cascade diagram and asked to interpret it, interpret the float, interpret the critical paths and that kind of thing. But more often than not, the whole point of these questions is drawing the Gantt chart and then interpreting it in the way that we've done. As I said, this is the final video for the first year of this topic. So far, the only resource that we've worried about as a contributing factor to the length of a project is the time it takes to do each activity. Critical path analysis in the second year builds upon these ideas and introduces the additional resource of number of workers. So not only do we know how long an activity can take, we also know how many workers it needs to be completed in that time. This is really important for a project manager because you know how many employees you have. You know that you have a maximum, say, of example, 7 employees. So although the Gantt chart might tell you that, yes, you can complete the project in this time, the number of workers, on, say, day 8, because of all of the activities that must be happening on that day, the maximum number of workers you need, or the number of workers you need is, say, 10 workers, well, that's going to delay the project because you don't have 10 workers. So that's the extension for the second year, but that's in another video. This is now complete for the first year of the critical path analysis. Thank you for watching.